The Moto X4 rocks a dual lens camera on the back, Motorola's second such offering after the Moto G5S Plus, except this time the 12 megapixel primary lens is backed by an 8 megapixel wide angle lens. All very nice and all, but are they actually any good? Here's our full Moto X4 camera review. At any time, the Moto X4's camera app can be booted up with that standard quick double twist of your wrist. This functions even when the phone is hibernating, and it means you're ready to shoot in just a second or two. The interface is pretty straightforward, with a virtual shutter button to take snaps, as well as shortcuts to switch to the video mode and swap between the front and rear cameras. You also have quick toggles for the timer, LED flash and HDR feature, which helps out with that tricky contrast. The two rear lenses can be switched between at any point with just a tap of another on-screen button, and swapping to that wide-angle view is handy if you want to fit an entire sexy vista in your shot. You also get a few bonus camera modes to play around with, which we'll touch on in a little bit. However, one of the best on offer is the full manual mode, which allows you to twiddle and tweak the ISO levels, white balance and so on to get a very precise result. Definitely useful if you're a more confident photographer. The Moto X4's standard lens locks onto a subject quickly and cleanly as long as the lighting conditions are adequate. Photo capture is reasonably fast, again as long as the scene isn't too dark, although that burst mode, activated by holding your finger on the shutter button, is much slower than we're used to. And when the lights are a little bit dim, you'll definitely notice a bit of a pause after you hit the shutter button as the lens adjusts. Action shots can be tough to capture, especially with up-close subjects. Trying to get a decent snap of our wrestling cat was near impossible, for instance, as she constantly came out blurred. Still, detail levels are strong while colours are accurately captured. That main lens is also impressively good at reproducing high contrast scenes. The Auto HDR mode handles glare and tricky lighting without breaking a sweat. Switch to that wide angle lens and you'll certainly capture a lot more action, with the results similar to the LG V30. However, that lower aperture also means that low light situations and high contrast scenes don't come out quite as cleanly. Of course, you can just simply take a photo with both lenses, one after the other, and then decide after the fact which one suits you best. When the lights get really low, you'll want to keep that flash activated. Without it, your shots will definitely be a bit of a murky mess, either filled with grain or too dark to actually make out. As for those bonus camera modes, they can be quite fun, but they're also generally slightly flawed. The spot colour feature, for instance, works fine on flat uniform colours, but tends to struggle once shades and other complexities are involved. While depth mode on the whole is pretty effective with human subjects, yet pets and inanimate objects are usually blurred around the edge. And there's also a distinctly silly stickers feature that can turn your bestie into a cat or a super camp unicorn. Awesome. When it comes to capturing home movies, the Moto X4 is again quite accomplished, although definitely suffers from a couple of fatal flaws. You have a choice of three main settings here: Full HD at 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, and then 4K Ultra HD resolution. You can choose which lens to use before you begin recording, depending on whether you want a pulled out view to capture a vista. Although that wide angle lens won't capture video at Ultra HD, you're stuck at Full HD 60 frames per second maximum. On the whole, detail levels are strong even at Full HD, so your video looks decent when viewed back on a big screen telly. Colours are accurately reproduced, while the likes of contrast are well handled. However, image stabilisation at all levels is definitely less than stellar, so you'll want to stand relatively still to keep your home movies from being a bit too jerky. And besides that lack of stability, we also aren't too convinced by the 60 frames per second mode. For instance, we noticed a strange focus flow when capturing the super smooth footage with the Moto X4's standard lens. This lens worked perfectly at 30 frames per second, yet bumping up the frame rate means that the lens suddenly struggles to lock onto your subject, even when you're stood perfectly still. The result is lots of popping and some momentary blurriness throughout our footage. This definitely needs to be corrected in some form of future software update, although we had no such issues at 60 frames per second with the wide angle lens, which has a more uniform focus. However, in 60 FPS mode, the wide angle lens significantly crops the viewing area, presumably an EIS measure to keep things nice and smooth, so there's actually no wide angle benefit at this frame rate. The Moto X4 is one of few smartphones these days to pack an LED flash for its front-facing camera. That's great news if you want to shoot a sexy selfie in the club or whatever else it is that young people do these days. Besides that, the 16 megapixel f2.0 aperture lens is perfectly good for capturing everyday shots when you're out and about. Detail levels are solid, colours are cleanly reproduced, and the viewing angle is wide enough so you can fit a few heads together when needed. And of course you get the obligatory beauty mode, which makes your skin nice and smooth and gets rid of some of that gunk. And you also get those same AR stickers to play around with, which pop up automatically when your face is detected. If you ever wanted to be a cat or an astronaut, get ready to make a mess in your pants. For a full Moto X4 camera review, check out recommo.com/mobile, and don't forget to give us a like, subscribe and the notifications bell. Thanks for watching.